explained by this idea of tectonic stress. There may be some other component there that's at work that we're really not sure about. So, you know, I don't think it. Again, I don't think it's not a mutually exclusive idea. It doesn't mean that extraterrestrials can be true, but there's a lot of imagery though that comes up time and time again that has this kind of womb-like inner Earth feel to it. But as far as them literally coming from a hollow Earth in the classic sense, I don't think so.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not sure about all
They
that
come
either,
from
but-
Haiti.
What?
I'm joking.
I have a geologist friend. I mean, she just graduated. She's not like hardcore geologist yet. But I was asking her like if any of her friends or her colleagues knew anything about like maybe the geological makeup of these particular areas, like Marfa would bring up something like that. And she's like, she was going to ask around and talk. But I mean, they're not really into the whole paranormal thing. They're strictly, you know, like go out and find rocks and, you know, basically try to figure out how they can use them in practical areas, not necessarily paranormal.
Right.
So, I mean, she didn't get anywhere with it, but.
And that's one of the things that even if you study Marfa and its geology, it's completely different than East Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you've got a dry, sandy, desert-like environment in West Texas where the Marfa lights occur, and then in East Texas you've got the swampy, you know, forested, thick vegetation and a completely different ecosystem.
I was watching the show, I think it was called Paranormal, where they were talking about that stuff, and they thought it maybe had something to do with all the granite at Marfa, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that would make sense if it's happening other places and they don't have the same.
And there do seem to be some very dramatic correlations between certain recurring areas of Earth lights and luminous phenomena, unidentified aerial phenomena. But and one of the researchers I find most interesting is this very skeptical to the point of almost being a debunker behavioral scientist in Laurentian University. His name is Michael Persinger, and most people have heard about him because of the God helmet. This helmet that he's created with magnets that he can program a computer to stimulate your brain and create
I've actually heard about him.
the sense of a presence,
Okay.
or
All
the
right.
sense of floating out of the body, or various other descriptions that match some experiences in out-of-body experiences, alien abduction experiences, ghost hauntings, and that sort of thing.
Wow.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was
We even in like doing the ghost hunting, I mean, that's one of the first things we do is with our EMF reader, because people always, oh, somebody's staring at me. Well, that could be an electrical thing.
And we did have one case in particular where the house had ultra high EMFs, like bouncing off the walls, like all throughout, like the electrical work was putting it off. And I mean, I genuinely believe these people had spirits in their home, but aside from that, I think some of the things they were experiencing was triggered from the high EMFs too.
Yeah, and with UFOs, the one thing we know about the phenomenon, besides it's been with us as long as we've been here, is that it's a lot of energy, and it can affect the environment, but that energy can also affect human consciousness and perception. And it's those areas that have led me into some rather conspiratorial angles with the types of technologies that this could be applied towards. But it's relevant to all these areas of study: parapsychology, paranormal ghost investigations, and UFO investigations. I think it's really important for folks to have a basic understanding of electromagnetics and that sort of thing, and the kinds of effects. And so I'm very glad to hear that, you know, that's one of the things that comes up, because I think there are a lot of phenomena that can create the sense of a haunted house that in fact may be acoustical, may be electromagnetic, or vibratory. All of these things can affect human consciousness. All of them can cause brainwave changes. But again, that's not to say that I'm not trying to reduce it to some, you know,
But that's one of the things we look
hallucination
for.
induced
But
by all
it's
these
something
things.
to consider. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
On the other hand, I mean, the assumption by most spiritualist ghost investigators is that there's an electromagnetic component to the spirit world, and in both the cases of paranormal phenomena and UFO phenomena, I mean, EMF is a key component. It's one of the few things that we can try to actually measure, you know, repeatably. So
Yeah.
I find all that quite fascinating.
I know, like when I'm doing a walkthrough on a house, if there's a spirit presence, if it's close enough to me, like I feel like static electricity's on my body, like going up to my head and tingling and stuff. It's really interesting. I tingle. What can I say? No, I'm just kidding. But it is interesting.
So I wanted to, well, what did you, I don't mean to interrupt, if there's something else you necessarily want to take to the table. I just wanted to ask about, like, there are different people who believe different things about Roswell, and I just want to bring this up because I heard this the other night.
And of course, it's one of the most talked about cases, probably.
Yeah. And you were talking about how this particular general who had, or we were talking about how this particular general who was, I guess, appointed. How did he get this gig? Was he just in the area? What? How did he get this gig?
It's military.
I think it was just his jurisdiction.
Yeah. It's, okay. And when they had Roswell, the so-called, UFO crash, and they were looking at all of the debris, they had taken it inside and was looking at it, saying it was a weather balloon, and he's standing here with this letter. And apparently this letter had a lot of information about, like, there were, it was not necessarily a UFO. They didn't call it that, did they?
At that point, they weren't using that acronym.
Yeah, okay. They were just saying, like, some kind of ship, and there was bodies and everything like that. Yeah. And I mean, he was out there saying, yeah, this is a weather balloon, and da-da-da, but he had a letter in his hand that can be read saying otherwise. Right. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, that particular research project intrigued me at the time when somebody noticed, hey, wait, there's this letter that you can see in the photograph. Of course, it's very indistinct. This is a photograph from 1947. And so they were blowing it up, and it did kind of have that quality of it being a Rorschach test. You're going to see what you want to see, maybe. Mm-hmm. But there were some very interesting things that came out of not just one person's analysis, but a whole group of people's analysis. People from around the world looking at it, trying to figure out what it was saying, and yeah, they came up with some things that had nothing to do with a weather balloon. Now, there's, of course, lots of speculation. Maybe that didn't even have. Maybe that document had nothing to do with the Roswell case, but most of the accounts seem to indicate that it most likely did. That he was clutching it because he was dealing. It had to do with what he was dealing with at that time. And yeah, there he is with ostensibly something detailing a much more interesting thing than a weather balloon. Now, interestingly enough, that the interpretation of that is referring to a crash and bodies, as the general assumption is that letter said. Again, I used to firmly believe in Roswell as told, down through the ages. I mean, the story actually only emerged in the 70s. I mean, there's the events at the time. The news carried it, but then very quickly General Ramey quashed it and labeled it a weather balloon and held. And
everyone believed it, and no one even talked about it anymore.
It's easier to believe that.
But that was, that and the events in the month before with the Kenneth Arnold sightings. That really was the birth of the modern UFO era. I mean, that was when it became this kind of sensation, and this flying saucer fever gripped the nation, and it fascinates me on a sociocultural level. But I over the years I've read a lot of different takes on Roswell, and Whitley Strieber, who's a famous claimed abductee, horror writer, who's written a number of books on the subject of UFOs and alien abductions and general metaphysical stuff. He actually wrote a really, really excellent fictional book called Majestic, that is like his kind of retelling of what he thinks may have happened regarding Roswell, and it's a lot of really interesting tidbits in there that he never really put into any of his nonfiction, but it's very telling. There's a really great scene where the generals are all discussing some of the things that they've learned about